Kia ora, welcome to Under the Checkered Flag, MotoGP edition. I'm your host Kate, and we're just going to jump right in. It is Kate and Kelly here. Pozza is off on schoolies, so it's just girl chat time. And it's going to be great because Jorge Martin is our brand new world champion, and I am absolutely over the moon about that. Before we do ramble about Jorge Martin and his celebration, how he won the championship, and the fact that satellite riders can win world championships, we're going to talk about Moto3 because there's a huge amount of silly season news that came out. As expected, it started with the news that Angel Paqueras will move to MT Helmet's MSI to be alongside Rosea Yamanaka, who's remaining at the team. I did think that this would be the first chip to fall, so to speak. A lot of us were waiting on this announcement. It had been teased and spoken about for, I'd say, a good few months. But now we do finally have that confirmation.
It's actually debatable whether this is a good move or not because Leopard, they aren't a bad team. Like, just the year before, they won the title by Jaume Masia. Like, it really just depends. But if you think of it, MT Helmet's MSI, they have Ivan Otola, who finished 4th in the championship this year. And Ryusa Yamanaka, I believe, was like 6th or 7th. So it's really debatable whether it's actually a good move or not. But I feel like Engel can actually fight for some good podiums this year now that he's a bit more adjusted to the bike. So we'll actually see how that goes. That's going to be interesting to me to see which team will actually come out on top.
We also have the news that the Snipers team will be Nicola Caro and Riccardo Rossi.
Yeah, Snipers have actually come out with a decent lineup, I'll say. I do admit I wouldn't be the biggest fan of Ricky Rossi. I know, end me now. I don't think he's great. I really don't. I don't think there's much potential in the guy. Carraro isn't much better, but at the same time he's okay. So it's not a bad lineup. It wouldn't be my favourite one, but it's not too bad. So yeah, happy to hear that they have a full lineup.
Stefano Neppa will be moving to SIC 58, which I'm ridiculously excited about, being a Neppa fangirl and probably the biggest Neppa fan on this podcast. Auro Carpe debuted at the weekend for the team he will be joining next year, which is KTM IO.
Carpe, I'd say, actually really did have a good debut. I wasn't expecting too much out of him, and he didn't give us too much, so it's fair. But he didn't excessively crash or do really badly. Like, he was actually, you could see his name a couple of times on the leaderboard. Like, he did way better than I expected him to. I'm very proud of him. I think he'll do a lot of good things. I genuinely do.
And what about your thoughts on Neppa to SIC 58?
Yeah, I think this actually could be a good move for him. He will be replacing Filippo Farioli, if I'm not totally mistaken. I think it's quite sweet. I really do. Nepa is really an up and coming talent, and to be sent to a team like, obviously, Simoncelli 58. If you don't know what happened to Marco Simoncelli, I recommend you look it up. The fact that he gets a chance to be at such a historic and just nice team, I think he can do some really great things. And a teammate like Lunetta, who has had a few podiums this year, I think it would be a really good move for him. I think he could do some really cool things on that bike, and I hope he does.
While we clearly are Neppa fans here, the team that this podcast will be fully supporting next year is Boe Motorsport. The reason for this is because they're running two rookies, one of whom is Richard Moodley, but the other one is podcast favourite Kiwi Cormac Buchanan. Very excited by this news. What about you, Kelly? Because I know you are just as much of a Cormac fan as myself and Pozza. Even though he's not here, I think I can speak for him on this one.
I admit it does feel like we were all kind of just sitting around waiting for him to get signed, but I'm really happy. I'm really happy it was with BOE Motorsports because if you don't know, in Moto3 they are actually a very strong team. Their current lineup is David Munoz and Joel Kelso, and they are two very, very strong riders. consistently fighting for podiums, and for a rider like Cormac to be sent to a team like that straight away, it could either go good or bad. He could meet expectations, or he could like severely flop, and then it could go very badly. But I do have a lot of faith in the guy. I genuinely do. And I'm really excited to see what he can do. I think there's so much potential in him that we couldn't see this year in Junior GP purely from bad luck. So a little hint of good luck and a good bike, I think he could do some really good things.
Kelly, with all of these riders chopping and changing, which are you most looking forward to seeing? Which combination and which rider?
Honestly, I'm actually really, really excited over Cormac Buchanan, and I think I always will be. I'm always going to be a bit annoyed that MLAV didn't go with Casey O'Gorman for Moto3, but there is, regulations for age that couldn't be met, so I understand it. I'm just a little bit annoyed. So in a general term, I'm most excited for Cormac Buchanan to come in, because I genuinely do believe he can do some really, really cool things on that BOE. And I hope I got to witness him get a win. That's the one thing I want. And I'm hoping that will happen for me. Please happen for me, please.
I'm pretty much in the same boat, although I do want to note that MLab haven't announced their second rider yet, so there's still a very, very faint hope for you. But age, the rules are the rules generally there. I'm very curious as to who will be in that seat. I definitely agree. I think Cormac coming in is what I'm most excited about, but I'll also eagerly be watching the Angel Paquera storyline with quite a bit of interest. So let's talk about Moto2, because it was a pretty sensational race. There was quite a few dramatic crashes, which were rather unfortunate, but to me, they did look quite a lot like racing incidents. There was one in particular which I want to mention, which was basically it looked like Dennis Onchu was involved in it. I watched it back and it did look like an absolute racing incident. And then popping up on timing, it comes Dennis Onchu long lap penalty. And I was ready to throw my toys out of the pram completely. I was just like, oh my gosh, the stewards, why do they keep doing this to us? But alas, his long lap penalty was for track limits. So totally valid, and there'll be no steward slander right now for that incident. What did you think of the race?
Considering Moto3 was an absolute crap show with Vire having an engine problem for me, Moto2 was that little bit better, but not really. Aaron Kennett won, final race of the season, didn't finish second. It's a bit better than what I expected. Diogo Moreira came through with his first podium at the final race of the season, which, like, the aura is insane. Like, well done there, mate. Manny Gonzalez got a podium, which is good for me because I needed it. One thing that really made me sad is Zonta van der Gorberg and Celestino Vietti. They had a big clash with each other. It was more so a racing incident. It couldn't really be avoided, but they clashed. Celestino has injured his left collarbone, which hope you get better soon. Zonta, I was really excited for because he had such a good starting position. He qualified so well, and then it ended quite quickly. We'll put it that way. On the first lap, Jorge Navarro, Jake Dixon, and Garcia had a big crash with each other. All okay, but a bit depressing to look at because I wanted Dixon to do quite well, and he was on my prediction. So thanks, Jake. Yeah, apart from that, the race was actually quite good. Fermin Aldeguer finished ninth for his last race with Speed Up, which isn't great, but better, Overall, good race.
And Furman finishing ninth, I'm actually pretty happy with. Probably because last time at this track, obviously he crashed out of the long lap penalty loop. This time he started 18th after a qualifying crash, did a long lap penalty, and still came out to finish in ninth. So overall, as a member of the Furman fan club, I'll take this result, especially considering he's had such a tough season. I did also want to mention Ai Ogura and Sergio Garcia, but we didn't see him on screen nearly as much. They had the most beautiful bike and leathers. This livery is definitely going to be in contention for my livery of the year when we come to that podcast. Overall, it's stunning. There will be photos on screen if you're watching the video version. It had gold and blue, and I believe it was just celebrating their championship. I could be totally wrong in that because I haven't done a deep dive into it, but honestly, one of the most beautiful liveries I think I've ever seen. The fact they had the leathers to match it really just took the cake. I don't know, put the cherry on top of the cake. Clearly my words aren't working for me today, but it was just sensational, and yeah, I really, really enjoyed the Moto2 race. On to the main event, the weekend. MotoGP, a brand new champion, has been crowned, and it's Jorge Martin. Overjoyed with this news. It was probably not the most exciting race of all time, but it definitely was quite entertaining given everything that was happening. So Aleix Espargaro did some excellent defending from Jorge Martin, for Jorge Martin, not from him. He was definitely helping his friend out. It all started right at qualifying, where Aleix Espargaro gave Jorge Martin a tow, and that got him on the front row. I do have to give absolute props to Pecco Bagnaia for doing exactly what he needed to do this weekend, which was doing the double. He just came into this weekend off the back of so many mistakes. It was just too hard of a hill to climb for him. But overall, sensational for Jorge Martin. We did see quite an interesting, but not the most cringeworthy, thankfully, celebration from Jorge Martin. He is embracing the Martinator. He came out dressed as a Terminator, blew up some ice brick with his hands. Overall, just very, very fun. And I really want him to run that number one plate, because I still think Ducati did him so dirty. He did absolutely everything right, and he's proven that by becoming the world champion. And so I'm so happy he did get to do this before going to Aprilia, because yeah, who knows what results we're going to see from him next year. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets some wins, because that Aprilia has proven to be fast at some tracks. But what do you think about Martin becoming our newest world champion?
Against contrary popular belief, I actually am happy that Jorge won it. Like, of course I wanted Pecco to win, and I will still want Pecco to win in the future, but it doesn't mean that I'm not happy for the guy. He still did a lot to deserve the championship, and I'm happy for him. I'm just upset, you know? I know it's a weird thing to try and imagine, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to be angry at him for winning something that he's been working towards. I'd have to admit, I'm honestly not happy. I don't like it when riders sacrifice their own results to help another rider. Like, Aleix, I feel like he could have gotten a better result if he wasn't trying to protect Jorge, but that might just be me. I don't want to get into all that now. We're talking about Jorge Martin being the 2024 champion, and I'm really, really happy for him. Now, Jorge, what Pecco said, you have to marry Maria, and I will be standing by waiting for that, so better get planning.
I have to admit, seeing how nervous Maria, his girlfriend, was, and his entire family were, as well as the Pramac team as a whole, it was really quite wholesome. You forget that, it's not just the riders that are stressed, it's the entire crew, it's their friends, it's their family. They work so hard for this, dedicate their entire lives to it, and so do their families. So, very good to see a result. Also, got to give Pecco a shout out for taking the loss so gracefully. Always knew he was going to be, just because he's such a class act. But the way, in his interview, he didn't want to take away from Jorge, and I just thought that was so respectful. Overall, really great to see. I am a little bit annoyed, though, at Davide Tardozzi, because after the race, we come out and see this quote that he has said in regards to Aprilia and Martin possibly running the number one plate next year. Now, this quote is, "If Aprilia wants to buy the number one plate Let's see if they can keep it next year. End quote. This kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, because while on one hand I do understand what he's saying, that it was Ducati that won this number one plate, they also didn't, because they let Martin go, and just the way he's worded it makes it sound like it was Jorge's decision to leave, and partially it was, but it was also a forced hand decision, which, yeah, you know mine, Pozza and Kelly's thoughts on Ducati's picking Marquez, choosing marketing over up-and-coming young talent. Wasn't the smartest move, in our humble opinion. But I guess we'll see next year, when what I expect to happen is Marc Marquez absolutely wipes the floor with the field. I suppose I'm looking at it like a 2019 2.0 for next year. So I could be eating some humble pie. But yeah, I really didn't enjoy this quote, because just the way they treated Martin. He's the rider that's won this championship. Yes, it was on the Ducati. Yes, it wasn't on the Aprilia. But the absolute satisfaction that I will feel if Martin rides with that number one plate will absolutely be worth it, because it's the biggest, I suppose, stuff you to Ducati that he could do. And I'm all for that, because it would just be entertaining. That is it for us on the weekend's racing. I am going to be here next week talking all about the test, because there's so much that I'm going to want to digest, from Jorge Martin and Marco Bezzecchi jumping onto the Aprilias. We've got Enea Bastianini and Maverick Vinales swapping to KTM. Mark on a current spec bike. We've got Pramac now running Yamahas with Jack Miller and Miguel Oliveira. 3 rookies in the forms of Furman Audiger, Somkjat Chantra, and Ai Ogura, all moving to MotoGP. I'm going to be watching the test all day, basically. I've taken an extra day off work just so I can watch it all, do a deep dive into some of the technical aspects that come out of it, and I'll be able to share it with you in a nifty podcast. Nice, short and sweet for those of you who do not have the time to take off work and just absorb motorcycle racing, especially when it comes to testing, because it is a lot harder for a lot of people to watch, because it's not nearly as thrilling for other people, unless you're a bit of a nerd like me, in which case I find it just as, if not more, thrilling. Over the winter/summer break, we will still be here every week. We're going to have a few people on as well. We're going to be doing things like the best race, best moments, season summary sort of things, winners and losers, riders ratings, prediction podcasts for next year, and for our special guests that we have on, we'll have things like a grid breakdown and some 2025 track reviews. So fear not, even though the racing has finished for the season, we will still be here yapping, talking, and sometimes arguing about MotoGP, Moto2, and Moto3. But for now, see you next week.